What's good, y'all? Let's talk about this Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter, the aftermath fight. And yeah, if y'all didn't catch my live that I made on Saturday when I was giving my chat, well, my commentary essentially about Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter in real time, and I was breaking down the fight, round per round. But at some points of the fight, I was just so focused that it's even like it makes it even harder for me to concentrate while commentating at the same time because I'm not used to normally doing that, like in a live commentary. Well, of course, I did my first one with Pacquiao Ugas, but with Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter, it was super competitive, man. Like, it's hard to score some of these rounds. And let's get to it, man. Terence Crawford, man, like he stepped up in competition. He stopped Shawn Porter, and he gets all the credit in the world, man, in my opinion. Because I heard a lot of people out there picking Shawn Porter in that fight. A lot of you know, bunch of a bunch of fans, like that are detracting Terence Crawford for being number one pound for pound, quote unquote. Like, well, not quote unquote, but like that are against him being number one pound for pound because they got Canelo in their pound for pound list. But at the same time, man, the lists are subjective, like Terence Crawford said after the fight. Like, he made a real good point about it. He's not even making a fuss about it anymore. Like, he's saying it like how Andre Ward did, like when uh everybody was still going back and forth on the pound for pound, even though he beat Kovalev that rematch. It's what Terence Crawford said. Essentially the same thing, talking about how it's up to the fans to decide whether who's pound for pound or not, whether they still rank Terence Crawford as number one or they rank Canelo as number one after becoming undisputed with Caleb Plant. I mean, to me, like I could understand why somebody would say they're interchangeable because Terence Crawford has been already did undisputed a long time ago. Even though he didn't make a defense of his titles, but he still became undisputed in another weight class, and he was a two-time lineal, and so was Canelo too, man. So I could understand both parties on what they say, and some people argue that Canelo is still number one pound for pound, because of the resume and stuff. But I can understand that too, and it makes a lot of sense to be honest. But Terence Crawford, man, has been knocking out a lot of opponents at welterweight recently, Uh, just knocked out a guy that's never been stopped and who was proven to have like durability, he took a lot of punches from Keith Thurman. He took a lot of punches from Errol Spence. He took some shots from Danny Garcia. He wasn't as you know, bad defensively, against Danny Garcia, but he wasn't also like, how do you put it, man? Because that was a weird fight for Shawn Porter when I saw him against Danny Garcia. He beat Danny Garcia, but the thing is, Shawn Porter, man, like he knows he's a real good boxer, man. Like more than people give him credit for, and we saw it a little bit in this fight against Terence Crawford. Because Terence Crawford, man, like it took him a while to adjust to that style of Shawn Porter. Because I was saying it in the live that Shawn Porter is way too sudden of a fighter. Like it almost reminded me of the Gamboa fight a little bit, where the suddenness of Gamboa was giving Terence Crawford problems, man, early on. But as soon as Terence Crawford reaches those like what late rounds, mid rounds, that's when he starts to adjust to that suddenness. That's why I always thought that Manny Pacquiao would be a bad style matchup for a little while, but then I could see like Crawford adjusting after the fourth round, and then he could eventually stop Pacquiao. So yeah, man, Terence Crawford like made his adjustments in the ninth round. It was real close to early on in the fight, in my opinion, of course. But by the time it was the stoppage, I had it 86 to 85 for Shawn Porter. I mean, for Terence Crawford. I mean, because Shawn Porter was starting to fade a little bit in those later rounds. Like those body shots that Terence Crawford was landing good on. Like we remember those body shots against Julius Ndongo. We remember those body shots against even some of his welterweight fights like Jeff Horn, Jose Benavides. And we already know that Terence Crawford is the type of fighter that will take somebody into deep waters if he wanted to. And to me, he took Shawn Porter to the deep waters, and we started to see like those adjustments. And I was saying in the live that by the time it was round 8, the next 4 rounds was what Terence Crawford needed in order to solidify him winning this fight, on the scorecards. So we saw him like starting to dominate those rounds, round 9 and then round 10 obviously was the stoppage round, but round 9 was like the beginning of the end because we saw Terence Crawford make some adjustments. We saw Terence Crawford creating those angles, setting up those traps for Shawn Porter. Like the way that Shawn Porter was coming at a certain angle and Crawford was able like to pivot, almost look like a bull in a matador. And Terence Crawford knew, man, at that point, like, oh yeah, I could set this guy up for a bunch of uppercuts. And we saw him like constantly landing that lead right hook from the southpaw stance. That's an awkward punch to throw, by the way, from the southpaw stance when you think about it, because everyone is used to seeing the check left hook from the orthodox stance, but never talks about a check right hook from the southpaw stance. Some fighters are able to do it, the Cuban fighters like Irzan Lara or Guillermo Rigondeaux. But Terence Crawford, man, he's real proficient at using it. Like Terence Crawford is able to change the angle on it. Like he's not as one dimensional as that whole style. You know what I mean? Because Terence Crawford thinks outside the box. Like you could see him changing up the angle every time Shawn Porter comes like at a certain elevation with his head. Like he could be up here, he could be down there. Terence Crawford will just like move the trajectory of that right hook because like he has his lead hand in like a fluid motion. I don't know if you guys like watch too many Terence Crawford fight, but that kind of reminded me of the Victor Postal fight because Terence Crawford was like pawing his lead hand every time that he was fighting Victor Postal, just feeling out the range. And it was kind of reminiscent to it, but at the same time, different styles, of course, because Shawn Porter is way better than Victor Postal. But the way that Shawn Porter was like beaming in and stuff, like you could tell that it was already going to take a toll later on in the fight because you saw Bomac say, or somebody in the corner said that Shawn Porter wasn't coming in as he normally would. And that's when Terence Crawford like sensed that there was blood in the air, man, and especially when they told him that he was down on the cards. I'm guessing that they were listening to Andre Ward, but not the official scorecards, because the official scorecards, when I saw them after the fight, they were actually going for Terence Crawford. And one of them actually had Terence Crawford way ahead a little bit too much for my liking, in my opinion, of course. But yeah, man, I think they heard Andre Ward's card because Andre Ward, I think, was scoring it for Shawn Porter by at least like a point or something. But Terence Crawford, man, like he turned up the heat, man, because everyone thinks that Terence Crawford is this guy that's sweet and soft, but he really isn't, man. Like that guy is mean, bro. Him and Canelo are the meanest guys. Even though like they're the top pound for pound fighters, man, they got a mean streak to them, and that's what you got to have, man, in this sport. You got to have a mean streak to you. And Terence Crawford turned it up on Shawn Porter, man. Like started landing a lot more of those right hooks because Shawn Porter was getting a lot more tired, and you could see that he was like getting frustrated a little bit, especially when he got knocked down the first time. That's when like he started to try to apply the pressure as much as he can, but he kept on getting countered by Terence Crawford, man. Those punch variations, man. Like I'm telling you, like I've constantly said this in previous lives, that punch variation will get you anywhere in boxing. And that's what Terence Crawford did. Like he was throwing left uppercuts, he was throwing lead right hooks. I think I even saw a lead uppercut that he would normally throw that we've seen in the Benavidez fight and the Kavalaskis fight. So yeah, man, Terence Crawford, as soon as he knocked him down the second time, Shawn Porter got pissed off. He was hitting the ring. I actually like that, to be honest. Like that gave the fight like a whole different aesthetic to it. You know what I mean? Like seeing the fighter hit the ring instead of just like giving up out there. They're all pissed off that they got knocked down and they want to get their get back, but Kenny Porter had to stop the fight apparently. I thought that it was a little strange to me that he would stop the fight like that, but at the same time, man, like I think about all the fights that Terence Crawford has had, like Terence Crawford has like every time when he's about to finish an opponent, you already know where it's going, man. Like Terence Crawford is not gonna let off you, man. Like Terence Crawford, man, is essentially an assassin in there in the boxing ring, He doesn't have no remorse for anybody. Like he's there to end you, he's one of the best finishers in boxing. And Kenny Porter, I think, saw that from a mile away. But at the same time, I was listening to another live and they were saying that maybe it was Kenny Porter being sour about it, and I thought, you know what? That's what I think it is too, We saw the post-fight interviews, and I'm not gonna like try to say everything that they said word for word. As I said before on the previous live, that y'all are gonna have to watch it yourselves and make your own opinion of it. And the post interviews told me a lot about Shawn Porter and Kenny Porter's relationship and where this may go. Because Shawn Porter is saying that he officially retired right now, like since last night. I mean, well, since yesterday, since the day before yesterday when the fight ended. A couple hours later, we saw some reports that Shawn Porter has officially announced his retirement. And I'm like, wow, already? I was thinking to myself that he would keep on fighting, and but this time he's not going to be under Kenny Porter anymore. Cause I already saw that as soon as that fight ended, the way that fight ended, man, you know, like there's gonna be a big rift between Shawn Porter and Kenny Porter from here on out. Whether Shawn Porter is gonna continue with his boxing career or not, there's gonna be that big hole, that big rift, just because of what happened last Saturday, I should say, because we're already into the new week. But yeah, man, if Shawn Porter were to retire, man, if Shawn Porter is to continue his retirement, well, then congratulations to him. You know, like he's provided me with some of the most entertainment that I've ever had, like in the last couple of years of modern day boxing. You know, uh, since Pacquiao left, since all these fighters left, you know what I mean? You've had like lower level fights, you know, at the lower weight classes, like Salido versus Vargas in 2016. Uh, which other fight? You had a bunch of good fights too that were competitive, but Shawn Porter really gave me the fights of the year, in my opinion, because I loved his fight with Keith Thurman and I loved his fight with Errol Spence. And everyone's going to say that Shawn Porter is a gatekeeper, but he fought everybody, you know, and they were close fights. Like some people argue to this day that he won some of those fights. So I don't get what people are saying when they say Shawn Porter is good for nothing, you know, or he's a gatekeeper, all of this other stuff, man. But at the same time, your fighters are being criticized because they believe that Shawn Porter beat them. So think about that for a second. Let that sink in for a second too. Because Shawn Porter, man, is taking all the challenges. He took everything, man. You know, like everyone was saying that he was afraid of Errol Spence. Everyone was saying that Terence Crawford was the boogeyman now at welterweight. Well, he fought them and he fought Keith Thurman when everybody wanted him to, you know. Uh, that fight could have happened also in February of 2016 if Keith Thurman wasn't involved in that car accident that he had like in February. Because I remember that year very well, man, very well, because that was one of my favorite fights from Shawn Porter. Even though he lost it, he still made a great account of himself. And he still beat one of the champions that are reigning today. You know, Yordenis Ugas, man, that win makes Shawn Porter's career look even better. You know what I mean? From here on out, however Ugas looks, it just makes Shawn Porter look even better. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, I mean, Shawn Porter beat Devin Alexander. Shawn Porter beat Danny Garcia. Shawn Porter beat Yordenis Ugas when Yordenis Ugas was a hot contender during the time. Some people argue that he actually lost to Ugas. Okay, that's fair enough, but to me, it was a close fight. But in general, man, like who won that fight? You know what I mean? Like who really won that night? Shawn Porter, man. Like Shawn Porter is always involved in all these close fights, and everyone is already going to be screaming robbery, robbery, robbery. Okay, I understand that, but you can't. You got to admit it was a close fight, man. It was a real close fight between him and Ugas. I scored it a draw. But I don't mind somebody saying that Ugas won or Shawn Porter won, but it definitely wasn't no robbery. And Ugas is a champion already. You know what I mean? He just beat Manny Pacquiao, man. It just doesn't get any better than that. You know what I mean? So Ugas is doing well for himself. Shawn Porter did well for himself throughout his entire career, man. You know, congratulations to Shawn Porter. I hope he enjoys his retirement. Or if he does come back, I think everybody's going to be well, to me, I think he's going to come back, in my opinion, because the way that he's been fighting, you know, like the way that he talks about boxing and the way that he dedicates himself to it, you know, like he starts his own podcast. He's a PBC commentator. Yeah, I think this guy will be back, but that all depends on him. and what career moves he's gonna make. But at the same time, I don't think he's gonna be with Kenny Porter anymore. So yeah, Shawn Porter, if he does come back, I don't know if he's going to be at 147 pounds. I think he may end up going to 154 pounds because somebody like Danny Garcia wants to campaign up there. But I don't know about Danny Garcia succeeding in that weight class because Danny Garcia doesn't have the right style for it. Shawn Porter, on the other case, in my opinion, with the right opponent, he might be able to. But right now, we just heard about like an announcement for Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano. Well, they're already like getting their fight together for February of 2022. So we're gonna see what happens there and where the winner goes from there. Because what if Brian Castano wins? Like everyone is expecting Jermell Charlo to be the next undisputed champion at 154 pounds. But what about Brian Castano, man? Like, what if he wins, Or what if like the winner just moves up to middleweight and all the belts scattered like to somebody like, Erickson Lubin or Tim Tszyu, Jared Hurd. Like just imagine that, so many opponents that Shawn Porter could fight, in that weight class. Like him versus Tim Tszyu would be interesting in my opinion, because Tim Tszyu did fight Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn has a pressure style, even though I don't think he's as effective with his aggression as a Shawn Porter, or as even near the ring IQ as a Shawn Porter. I still think that Shawn Porter could give somebody like Tim Tszyu a run for his money, or possibly even beat Tim Tszyu if he attacks it right now, for a belt. Because I think Tim Tszyu is like one of the next contenders to fight for a world title, like in one of the sanctioning bodies. Because I was looking at the WBA rankings earlier, because I was trying to see if Keith Thurman was in the rankings, because I was thinking that, what if Keith Thurman tries to sneak himself in for a Yordenis Ugas fight? And that's how he's able to segue himself for a fight with Terence Crawford. So that's why I was looking at the WBA rankings. But there's a way that Shawn Porter can come back as a 2-division champion. But he really has to like reassess his own camp, like especially if he's going to keep on going with his career with Kenny Porter, or if he's going to stay retired, But in my opinion, I think he's going to come back. But if he does, there's a possible way that he could succeed in his comeback and be his own type of name, at 154 pounds, especially, believe it or not. So Shawn Porter was already a big guy anyways. He was already fighting big guys in the amateurs like Danny Jacobs, Alexander Usyk, which is crazy enough, man, Who else did he fight? Demetrius Andrade, I think. But there's a possible way that Shawn Porter can adjust to fighting at 154 pounds, because 154 pounds has a lot of fighters that are talented, but at the same time, they could be exploited by a guy from welterweight, like a Terence Crawford, like an Errol Spence, and like a Shawn Porter. But I don't think a fighter like Danny Garcia would succeed up there, but Shawn Porter might be, because Shawn Porter can change up his style. He could be a pressure fighter. He could be a boxer. Um, he could be both, believe it or not. He could make his aggression a lot more effective. He could be just fighting, sticking, and moving. You know what I mean? Because we saw that a little bit in the Errol Spence fight. So what I'm thinking is, like, hopefully we see something happen, with Shawn Porter, like what he's going to do with his career. Because I'm very interested to see, like, where he goes from here, So congratulations to Shawn Porter again. But let's continue talking about the welterweights, man, because I wanted to get up on this whole Keith Thurman situation. And Keith Thurman, man, like, he really wants that Terence Crawford fight, because he's been talking about him all day today. Like I've heard some videos say that Keith Thurman is calling out Terence Crawford. And y'all know that that's a great fight to me that I've been wanting to see for a while. And Terence Crawford, man, I think he would entertain a fight with Keith Thurman. But I would like for something to be on the line if it is going to be Keith Thurman coming back. I don't want to just see Keith Thurman fight Terence Crawford with nothing to offer. I mean, like, I want to see Keith Thurman fight somebody. You know what I mean? Everyone is saying a prospect, but if he could get Ugas, that would be great. or fight somebody like a Virgil Ortiz and get himself in that ranking. You know what I mean? In line to fight Yordenis Ugas, and that's how he could like find his way inside, find his way back to relevance again. Again, I mean, so there's a way that Keith Thurman can come back and actually make his comeback worthwhile, and Terence Crawford's time worthwhile as well, because we don't know if that Errol Spence fight is going to happen, because I haven't heard nothing about Errol Spence, to be honest. And I still believe in Errol Spence's skill set, and I believe in his fighting ability, man, to continue being a champion. But I still haven't heard nothing from him, like I haven't heard nothing about a fight coming up for him, and the way that he approached that whole Terence Crawford situation, like after the fight. Like, I don't know where his mindset is at right now. And I know he wants to unify with Ugas, but I also saw something that the WBA might be blocking it. So I don't know what's going on with it. But if Errol Spence is going to be on his little sabbatical, as I've constantly said in previous lives, well, man, I mean, Keith Thurman is still there. But Keith Thurman needs to do something himself, like Shawn Porter already did his own work too, like he defended his title once again, this time against a top 5 welterweight. So Keith Thurman, man, really needs to do something. He really needs to show something. And in order to do that, man, he got to fight somebody like Virgil Ortiz, in my opinion. And Yordenis Ugas, you can even argue Jaron Ennis too. I don't know where Jaron Ennis's ranking is, but fight with Jaron Ennis would be good too. So I would say that he would try to go into the WBA rankings, because the WBA recognizes him, and the WBA was actually his first world title that he won. Well, that he was not won in a fight against somebody, because that WBA title used to belong to Floyd Mayweather until Floyd Mayweather retired and vacated all the belts. And I think Keith Thurman was the regular champion at the time, and he was elevated to the WBA super champion. As stupid as that sounds, as me breaking it down. But hey, man, that's politics right there for you. The sanctioning bodies, and that's just what it is. But there's a way that Keith Thurman can come back to the WBA and fight Yordenis Ugas, and that's how he could get himself into a Terence Crawford fight. So I don't know if he's checking for Errol Spence, to be honest. It looks like to me that Keith Thurman is shifting his energy towards a Terence Crawford fight. And I would like to see that fight, but once again, man, he needs to do his own work. Like if he's gonna find himself in the top rankings of it, or like if he's gonna find a way to get himself in the number 1 spot for one, he could be a Virgil Ortiz or a Butayev or somebody like that, and make himself in line for a Yordenis Ugas fight and make it worthwhile. You know what I mean? Like if he beats Yordenis Ugas better than Shawn Porter, that makes the Terence Crawford fight a lot more huge than a lot of people anticipated it. You know what I mean? Because I really believe that this fight should have happened like in 2018, after Terence Crawford became undisputed. But unfortunately, Terence Crawford had to re-sign with Top Rank. And by the way, I forgot to mention that Terence Crawford is a free agent now. He's no longer with Top Rank. And it was funny as fuck, by the way, that he made Bob Arum, he broke Bob Arum's heart, like in front of a live audience in that post press conference. And Bob Arum wasn't having it. he gave Terence Crawford the look and shit, So congratulations to Terence Crawford on leaving that shitty brand Top Rank, the way that they've been treating Terence Crawford all these years, man. So I'm real proud of Terence Crawford that he finally left. But at the same time, I wish that he could have done this a long time ago, in my opinion, of course. So either ways, like Terence Crawford, there's still ways that he could get these big fights, at welterweight, that are still the same fights that he wanted in 2017 and 2018 with Keith Thurman, with Errol Spence. Like, they're still out there. They haven't gone anywhere. I mean, he just got his Shawn Porter fight right now. So, yeah, so hopefully, like, we see something come out of welterweight. We see something come out of Keith Thurman, like in my opinion, I think Keith Thurman should actually fight Ugas, man. And then that's how he makes the Terence Crawford fight bigger, man. Because I don't see that much interest in an Errol Spence fight compared to a Terence Crawford fight for him. Because he's been calling out Terence Crawford for more than a year, since at least like the beginning of 2020. So yeah, man, I'm about to get busy right now, y'all. Appreciate it, and for those of you that stopped by, and yeah, take care, y'all. We're about to see what happens these next coming weeks. Not that many fights coming up besides Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz, I think. And Rolly had to pull out due to some uh legal stuff that he's going through right now. So that's really it, like hopefully we get something, like February we're supposed to have Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano, allegedly, of course. So let's hope something comes out of that, because there's not that many big fights right now at the very end of the years. And we're just gonna have to wait until 2022, y'all. So appreciate it, y'all, and take care. Peace.